Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest stories. From the outside, Evelyn's life was the kind people envied: an elegant home nestled in a quiet suburb, 3 beautiful children, and a husband, Richard, whose reputation as a respected executive only added to the illusion. She smiled in family photos, hosted polite dinner parties, and wore her wedding ring like armor. But what no one saw was the silence, cold, calculated, suffocating. Their conversations were transactional, their intimacy a distant memory, replaced by a practiced routine that masked the emotional emptiness beneath. Evelyn wasn't battered or bruised, but she was breaking in a different way, starved for affection, for spontaneity, for someone to truly see her. Richard was always calm, always in control. He didn't yell, he didn't need to. His dominance came in quiet corrections, in condescending glances, in the way he made her feel like a background character in her own life. And so, Evelyn played the part she was given. The perfect wife. The devoted mother. But inside her, a quiet storm was building, a hunger for something real, something raw. Something that couldn't be scheduled or measured. It was only a matter of time before the illusion cracked, and when it did, everything she thought was hers would be called into question. Every Thursday evening, Evelyn found herself alone. Richard had his regional meetings, always out of town, always conveniently vague. She never questioned them, at first. In fact, she welcomed the solitude. Thursdays became her sanctuary, a day when she wasn't required to perform. No smiling across a dinner table at a man whose gaze skimmed over her like she was part of the wallpaper. She'd pour a glass of wine, let her hair down, and play old records from when they still laughed in the kitchen. But lately, the silence began to ache. Not just loneliness, but a sharp gnawing awareness that something was unraveling. That she was drifting, not just from her husband, but from herself. Then, without meaning to, her Thursday routine shifted. Max started appearing more in her thoughts. Her boss, charismatic and eloquent, with a laugh that echoed long after meetings ended. He wasn't just handsome, he listened. He noticed when she wore something new. Remembered the way she liked her coffee. There was nothing overt between them, not yet. But the glances lingered. The conversations deepened. And Evelyn, for the first time in years, felt visible. Not as a wife or a mother, but as a woman. Each Thursday that passed, she found herself dressing with more care, checking her reflection a little longer, wondering what exactly she was hoping for. The routine was still the same, but her heart had shifted, and she knew it was only a matter of time before everything else followed. It didn't happen all at once. The distance between Evelyn and Richard wasn't born of a single fight or a sharp betrayal. It was quiet, a slow creeping erosion of closeness. Like a tide that pulled away a little more each day, leaving behind dry, cracked sand where something soft and fluid used to be. Conversations turned mechanical, routine-driven. Did you pay the bill? Did Sophia finish her homework? The spark, the laughter, even the comfortable silences, they had vanished, replaced with the clinking of forks and the hum of a television neither of them truly watched. Evelyn would lie awake some nights beside Richard, listening to the evenness of his breath, wondering when the last time was that he touched her like he meant it. She couldn't remember. And it scared her, how numb she had become to it all. At work, Max filled the space left vacant by Richard's absence. His words were warm, his eyes steady. Evelyn found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't done in years, small things at first, but meaningful. He asked about her favorite authors, remembered the story she'd told about her first trip to the coast. She hadn't felt that seen in so long. And in those moments, Evelyn felt herself slipping, not just toward Max, but away from the version of herself who once believed love could survive on loyalty alone. What she had with Richard was history. But what she was beginning to feel with Max, that was dangerously close to possibility. The moment that changed everything was deceptively simple. It was a late Thursday evening, the kind Evelyn had come to savor. The house was quiet, Richard was away on another business trip, and she had poured herself a glass of wine, half distracted by the hum of a documentary playing in the background. Max had stopped by to drop off some case files, nothing unusual, or at least that's what she told herself. But the way his eyes lingered when she laughed a little too easily at his joke, the way his fingertips brushed hers as he handed her the folder, it was enough to stir something dangerous inside her. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Not like she should have. Instead there was a moment, a breath held too long, a silence too full, when their gazes locked and Evelyn felt that unspoken electricity ripple through the air. It wasn't about lust, not entirely. It was about being seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't felt in years. Max didn't touch her again that night, but his presence clung to her like perfume long after he left. Evelyn stood by the window after he'd gone, heart pounding, skin tingling with guilt and excitement. She knew the line they hadn't crossed was already smudged, that something sacred had been unsettled. And though no words had confirmed it, she and Max both knew, whatever this was, it wasn't going away. The question was no longer if something would happen, but when. After that night, nothing between Evelyn and Max remained the same, at least not in the spaces they used to occupy so easily. Every glance held a shadow, every conversation wore a veil. And yet, they danced around it, never naming the spark but letting it grow in silence. Thursdays became rituals. Richard was always out of town, and Evelyn pretended not to count the hours until Max's texts came, innocuous questions, legal updates, followed by a casual, "Mind if I stop by?" She'd say yes always, despite the unease curling in her stomach. The air around them thickened with every visit. They never touched, but it felt like they had. Every movement was laced with suggestion. When Max handed her a folder, his fingers would linger an extra beat. When Evelyn leaned too close to read a case note, her perfume would wrap around him like a question neither dared to ask. Outside, the world saw a lawyer consulting a colleague's wife. Inside, it was a web of tension, desire restrained by duty, by guilt, by the echo of vows whispered years ago. Evelyn tried to hide it from herself, to pretend her heart wasn't skipping for a man who wasn't her husband. But when she found herself replaying every word he said, searching for meaning, memorizing the way he smiled, she knew. This wasn't just restlessness anymore. It was motion. Slow, deliberate, and irreversible. A secret slipping beneath the surface, gaining momentum. And deep down, she feared it was already too late to stop it. It started with a gift, a harmless joke of a DNA kit Evelyn had bought during a holiday sale. She never imagined it would crack the delicate illusion of her life wide open. Weeks passed without a second thought, until one morning, a message pinged her inbox. A woman named Deborah, claiming to be the maternal grandmother of her daughter, Sophia. Evelyn's heart skipped. She reread the message, the words distorting into chaos. It didn't make sense. Sophia was Richard's child, or so Evelyn believed. Panic gripped her as she clicked through the DNA match report, eyes locking on a name that made her breath hitch, Max. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. But as the pieces fell together, memories Evelyn had buried rose like ghosts. That night years ago when she had felt so invisible, when Richard was away, when her loneliness swallowed her whole, and Max had been there, saying all the right things, looking at her like she mattered. Nothing had happened, or so she had convinced herself. But what if it had? What if the moment she wrote off as emotional weakness had turned into something far more permanent? Evelyn stared at the test results, her hands trembling. The walls around her world didn't just crack, they crumbled. Sophia was the thread that unraveled it all. In that quiet morning light, Evelyn realized that the truth was no longer buried. It was alive, walking, speaking, and one day, it might ask questions she couldn't answer without destroying everything. Richard never raised his voice. That was what made him terrifying. While Evelyn scrambled to contain the chaos unraveling behind their polished marriage, secrets, DNA matches, Thursday night rendezvous, Richard had already begun playing a different game. He smiled, nodded, kissed her cheek like nothing had changed. But beneath that calm exterior, a storm brewed, silent, calculated, and precise. He wasn't interested in screaming matches or throwing things across the room. No, Richard was a man who valued control. And control was what he slowly reclaimed, one document, one quiet move at a time. He began shifting finances, collecting evidence, tracing credit card records and hotel receipts. With the help of his longtime assistant Lila, he compiled it all, photos, timestamps, surveillance, conversations.
No confrontation. No accusations.
Just preparation. And when he contacted Max directly, it wasn't to fight. It was to make a deal, a quiet, devastatingly effective one. Evelyn had no idea. She was still operating under the illusion that her husband was oblivious, too caught up in his world to notice the betrayal. But Richard was steps ahead. When he finally handed her the divorce papers, his tone was cool, his expression unreadable. "I'm not angry anymore," he said, almost kindly. "I just want clarity." That was the final twist of the knife, his detachment. He didn't need revenge. He needed her to feel the weight of what she'd done in the silence she once filled with lies. And in that moment, Evelyn understood. She had been playing checkers, but Richard had been playing chess. In the days that followed Richard's quiet unveiling of the truth, the house felt like it had been dipped in ice. Evelyn moved through the rooms with practiced ease, setting the table, folding laundry, making small talk, but every moment was laced with tension. She knew something had shifted. Richard was present, but emotionally unreachable. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, he simply watched. And that was far worse. His silence was deafening, like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the winds would return. Evelyn tried to bridge the gap, suggesting a weekend trip, cooking his favorite meals, smiling a little longer than necessary. But each attempt landed flat. Richard met her with polite detachment, the kind that chilled her to her core. At night, when she reached for him, his body remained still. He was there, but he wasn't hers anymore. The dread built slowly. Evelyn began to wonder, what did he know? How much had he seen? Her dreams turned to shadows of surveillance footage, whispered conversations, the cold certainty in Max's eyes during their last meeting. She checked her phone more often, jumped at the sound of the doorbell, analyzed every word Richard said for hidden meaning. And yet, nothing happened.
No confrontation.
No explosion. Just quiet. That was the most terrifying part, because Evelyn knew that when Richard finally made his move, it would be final. Irrevocable. She could feel it coming. And as much as she tried to brace for the fallout, she also knew, you never see the real storm until it's already begun. The moment Evelyn stepped into the kitchen and saw the manila envelope on the counter, her breath caught. It was unmarked, sealed, and terrifying in its simplicity. Richard sat at the table, tea in hand, looking as if he hadn't a care in the world. "You should open it," he said calmly, not even looking up. Her hands trembled as she peeled it open, and the photos slid out like ghosts. Photos of her and Max. Laughing at dinners, walking into his home, that one night where her guard slipped and their closeness had turned undeniable. Evelyn stared at them, heart thudding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. "You've been following me?" she whispered. Richard finally looked at her, calm, steady, emotionless. "No. You've been walking into the trap I laid for you." Every word hit her like a wave. He hadn't yelled, hadn't confronted, he had documented. Quietly, methodically, waiting until she crossed the line enough times to leave no room for escape. "I trusted you," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "and you handed that trust to a man who was never yours to begin with." Evelyn dropped the photos, but the damage was done. Richard stood, placing divorce papers beside the now scattered evidence. "This isn't revenge," he said. "This is conséquence." She didn't cry. She couldn't. The only thing louder than the silence in the room was the crumbling sound of her carefully constructed world coming undone, brick by brick, truth by truth. The house was quiet now, eerily so. The kind of silence that comes not with peace, but with aftermath. Evelyn had moved out 2 weeks ago. No screaming match, no last-ditch apologies. Just a hollow goodbye and the click of the front door closing behind her. Richard stood in the living room surrounded by fragments of the life they'd once shared, photos half removed from frames, books she never returned to the shelves, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the cushions. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, he could breathe. The weight, the paranoia, the unspoken suspicions, they were gone, replaced by clarity. The kids adjusted more quickly than he'd expected. Sophia, his youngest, still asked when she'd see Mom next, but there was no sadness in her voice, only curiosity. Richard answered honestly, "Soon. But you're with me for now." And that was enough. In the quiet hours after bedtime, Richard didn't feel lost, he felt steady. The chaos had passed, and what remained was his. Not revenge, not bitterness, but a firm, steady foundation on which to rebuild. He poured himself a glass of wine, walked out to the porch, and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was streaked with the soft golds and blues of coming twilight. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. And though he bore the scars of betrayal, he also wore the strength of survival, and the quiet, powerful grace of letting go. In today's world, where routines often replace real connection, it's easy to lose ourselves in the noise of responsibilities and forget what truly fulfills us. This story reminds us to pause and check in, not just with our loved ones, but with ourselves. Emotional neglect can quietly unravel a life just as much as loud conflict. So take time to nurture your relationships, communicate openly, and never ignore your own needs in the process. If something feels off, don't bury it. Face it with courage. Healing and freedom begin with honesty, first with yourself, then with those around you.